There has definitely been a moment in your life where you finished a game so finely crafted, so well made that you end up watching the credits thinking, wow, I wish there was more of this. And sometimes you get exactly what you want, multiple times, way too many times. Holy shit, Ubisoft, please stop. Now this doesn't just apply to Ubisoft, there are amazing series out there that start to get stale. Not just for us, the players, but also for the developers, leading them to get burnt out creatively, which in turn makes them hate their jobs. The best way that they can combat this burnout is by creating a new IP or taking a huge risk and altering the genre of the series everyone knows and loves. And that risk is one that has to be taken, otherwise every studio will become miserable burnouts like the Call of Duty developers.
How long has this been going now?
I lost track.
I think working in the coal mines destroying your lungs is better than creating the definitive boring ass shooty game that has an $80 King Kong glove. Sometimes this shift in the genre for well-established IPs can alienate existing fans. Like the modern God of War games, for example. Whilst they are still technically action games, you cannot deny they are a complete shift compared to the originals. Whilst they were a complete success, it did alienate original fans of God of War, going for a more pretentious PlayStation story focus rather than trying to be a fun game, like the originals did. Look, this is how you scare a modern God of War fan. I understand why they did it, it's good to change things up a bit, but after the third God of War game in this reboot trilogy, when you bring it back, maybe zoom the camera out a bit more and get rid of Atreus. In fact, have Kratos kill him in the third game. Send him down a miserable, vengeful path again, that would be awesome. There are two examples of games that had their genres completely changed at a certain point that I want to talk about in this video. One is regarding a franchise that I was already a huge fan of, witnessing the genre change the moment it happened, and one is where I managed to get into the series I wasn't actually the biggest fan of because of the genre change. Honestly, this video just gives me an excuse to talk about them, so let's get to it. In 2018, back when E3 actually existed and these event shows weren't complete arse, the PC Gamer Show had a surprise announcement, and that was the fact that Yakuza 0 was being ported to PC. And I bought that shit day one, and I have not looked back since. This series is now one of my favourite series of all time, and what makes things better is the fact the studio RGG releases one almost every single year now, sometimes even two within the span of a few months. Yet despite this quantity, they're all still quality games, and don't feel like slop like most Western games that do the exact same over here. If you don't already know, Yakuza is an action game, where you're constantly getting into street fights, following a serious twisting narrative full of surprises, which is then contrasted by goofy shit you can do in the open world, like karaoke or posing half naked for a photo shoot, which ends in a fight because this is a Yakuza game. Yeah, these games can get a bit weird.
What the fuck?
They kept up with this formula for years, with the only thing really changing being the combat, due to the fact they changed engines every now and then, or the fact you were playing an older title remastered. Personally, by the time I got to the fourth game, I was kinda sick of it, and to be honest, this burnout hit even harder in the fifth and sixth game, especially the fifth, with it being an absolute behemoth in its length, although 5 did introduce us to the best character in the entire franchise, Shinada.
Oh, fuck.
Who they do absolutely nothing with for some reason. They knew things started to get a bit stagnant, and I think the 6th game was the nail in the coffin for that. It was a good game, like, don't get me wrong, it's just if you play through them from 0 to 6, you get kinda fed up with the combat. Knowing this for the 7th game, they decided to switch things up entirely by turning it into a turn-based JRPG, all because of the positive reception they received from an April Fool's joke. I'm not taking the piss here, this is something that would only ever happen with a studio like RGG. This change alienated a lot of original Yakuza fans, wanting a traditional action game like the previous entries, so a lot of them didn't actually bother with 7. It's their loss at the end of the day because Yakuza 7 is peak. Within the 7th game, you don't play as the well-established protagonist we all know and love, Kazuma Kiryu. Instead, we're playing as an Eric Andre looking twat called Ichiban Kasuga. Him being the new protagonist is why the genre shifted, because the turn-based combat is the way Ichiban views views any form of conflict through his eyes. This is mainly because he grew up playing the Dragon Quest games, and during the story he makes loads of references to the series, to the confusion of literally everyone else around him. He even gets a hero sword, but in the Yakuza way, so it's actually just a baseball bat wrapped in barbed wire. The way he gets it is this whole scenario too, where the bat is in the ground and no one is able to pull it up apart from Ichiban because he's the chosen one, and he holds it up, making him look like a complete knobhead. In the later game Infinite Wealth, his party members Namba and Adachi actually join in on the whole Dragon Quest shit due to their bond, making themselves look like complete twats in public too. Regarding the actual turn-based combat though, normal enemies who pick fights on you actually transform into random ass creatures called Sujimon, and it's another case where only Ichiban sees them this way, with everyone around him thinking he's a complete freak. There's also a theory that he has undiagnosed schizophrenia because of all this, and I think that's kind of funny. I really hope they address this in the 9th game, starring him, not the upcoming Majima one. Despite all of these changes, Like a Dragon is still a Yakuza game at heart. I mean, it is the 7th game in the series. If you look closely at the title, you can see a little 7 right there. Do you see it? So all of the staples that everyone all knows and loves is in this too. There's silly sub-stories, loads of mini-games, with some being so big they could probably be their own side game altogether. In fact, some of them are literally entirely different genres within themselves, like Dondoko Island, which is literally an entire Animal Crossing side mode. The only main difference between Yakuza and Like a Dragon is the turn-based combat, and I'm honestly really glad they made the change to turn-based, because I feel like if they stuck with it being real-time combat, with Ichiban only really having a different fighting style, I don't think it would have had the same impact it did. I know the genre shift alienated quite a few fans, but it seems to be a very vocal minority, because the series is probably doing the best it's ever done before, and they don't plan on ever slowing down, especially with experimenting with the genre of the series, with them sometimes going back to and expanding on the action combat, and even going off the rails. I mean, the next game is a literal pirate game. Us Yakuza fans are eating so good. Yet you wouldn't know, because Yakuza fans are some of the most ungrateful twats around. We're Yakuza fans, nobody hates the games more than us. Now let's talk about a series that took the opposite direction, going from the turn-based genre to the action-focused one. And that series is Final Fantasy. Now we all know what Final Fantasy is, it needs absolutely no introduction. In fact, it's older than probably 90% of you watching this video right now. That also includes me, and I'm 23, so you know I'm getting up there. I already feel my legs giving out. Now unlike Yakuza, I've never really been a huge fan of Final Fantasy. I've tried to play a few of them, especially the most well-received ones like 10, but I just bounced off them after a few hours. Same voice actor as Ratchet, by the way. Final Fantasy has actually been experimenting with the genre for a while, but never to the point of truly shifting, if that makes sense. Like for example, Final Fantasy 15. On the outside it looks like an action game, but whilst playing it feels like a weird ass hybrid between turn-based and real-time action. It's like they didn't want to fully embrace either side, and it just made the combat feel like it was designed by aliens. The same goes for 7 Remake, and people have made their opinions very clear on these games. Not in the most positive ways. So the developers finally decided to accept this truth and embrace the action genre. Final Fantasy 16 is peak. This is exactly what I've personally been wanting from a Final Fantasy game, and I would have never been able to experience this if it wasn't for a genre change. In fact, I've enjoyed this game so much that it's made me want to go back and give the others another shot. Final Fantasy 16 goes fully into the action combat, completely getting rid of any form of turn-based elements. Square Enix made sure they wanted to do this right, hiring a fella named Ryota Suzuki, who has a track record for working on the Devil May Cry series. You know, the peak of the action genre. So they chose very well, and it means I can rate this game with a triple S rank. You can really feel the Devil May Cry inspiration with the combat of Final Fantasy 16, even taking some elements and moves from the series. You're able to wield 4 different types of magic, with each one having their own skill tree with even more equipable magic, and you can mix and match all of these in the combat to create some disgusting looking combos. Since it's a Final Fantasy game, they go all out with the spectacle of these two, and it doesn't just feel like style over substance. Not only having everything look incredible during combat, but also making you feel awesome for pulling off half the shit you're able to do. 16 also follows the trend of other Final Fantasy games of having you fight literal gods, and I felt like with the turn-based combat in the older games you didn't really get to feel how big the scale of these fights truly were. But in 16, Oh boy, the spectacle of some of these fights are actually unmatched. Especially when the main character Clives becomes his icon Ifrit and shit becomes a fucking kaiju battle. Oh, and the soundtrack that goes along with some of these? Oh, holy shit, man. Yeah, these games are peak.